Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Indu Shakti, Assistant Professor, Department of English, St. Joseph's College of Arts and Science Autonomous, Cuddalore. This video is a continuation of the novel The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas, a novel retold by Beatrice Conwell. In the previous video, we have discussed chapters 11 and 12. Now let's discuss chapters 13 and 14. Chapter 13, The Escape. In this chapter, many years has passed by and they could no longer think of escaping, and Faria became too ill and weak. The old man again urged Dantes to go alone, but he refused. If they could not escape together, there would be no escape at all. This is what is the reply of Dantes. One night, while they were talking together in Faria's cell, the old priest had another attack. He knew that this time he would die. He beckoned Dantes to kneel beside him. Then he raised himself with a final effort. Monte Cristo, he gasped. Forget not Monte Cristo. Goodbye, Edmund. His breathing stopped and he fell back onto his bed. Dante sadly crept back through the tunnel to his own cell, waited for the jailer to arrive with his morning food. As soon as it had been placed on the floor of this cell, he went back along the tunnel to find out what was happening in Faria's cell. He knelt outside with his ear to the wall. He heard the jailer open the door and then rushed away and returned later with the governor of the prison. There was a tramp of feet as the governor entered with several guards. The governor told the guards to sew up the body in a sack to take it away in the evening for burial. After that, Dantes heard the guards lifting up the body. They must be putting it into the sack. They stayed a little longer to sew up the sack and left the cell, banging the door behind. As soon as he was sure that the guards would not come back, Dantes opened the tunnel, crawled into Faria's cell. There he saw the sack containing the old man's body lying on the bed. It had been sewn up ready for the guards to collect it in the evening. Now Dantes was very unhappy and lonely. There was now no one to talk, nobody to care about him. He felt that he had lost everything worth living for. He hoped he would soon die. That would be the only way to get out of the prison. As he was uttering these words, he suddenly stood still. He got an idea. Without giving himself time for second thoughts, he went to the hiding place in Faria's cell. He took out the old man's knife, his needle, and some of his thread. Quickly he opened the sack, removed the body, dragged it along the tunnel to the own cell. He put on his bed, covered it with his sheet. He would around the ape's head and the piece of cloth which he always wore around his own head at night. Then he turned the body with its face to the wall so that when the guard came in at night, he would think it was Dantes lying there asleep. He entered the tunnel once more, closing the stone slab behind him. Back in Faria's cell, he closed the entrance to the tunnel at the end also. Now he crawled into the sack holding the knife and needle and thread in his hands. He lay down on Faria's bed, sewed himself into the sack from the inside. All that he had to do now, lie still, wait for night to come. The guards would take him away instead of Faria. If anything should go wrong, if he were discovered, he would stab the guards with his knife, try to escape by running away. But if all went well, he would be buried in the ground. He would cut himself from his sack and burrow his way through the loose earth on top of him. He would then jump into the sea and swim away. So he waited for the night to come and for the guards to take the body away. The time came for the food to be brought to the prisoners. The jailer found that it was not Dantes who lay on the bed in his cell. He waited in fear and trembling. He thought, would this trick be discovered? But luck was with him. There was no cry of alarm. When at last the guards came to take Faria's body away, Dantes held himself as stiff as he could, so that he would seem like a dead man. Now, two guards picked him up and put him on a stretcher, while a third held a light by the doorway. He felt himself carried up and out of the dungeons. He could feel the cool night air around his body and could hear the scream of a night owl overhead. He knew now that he must be somewhere outside the prison. When he had been placed upon the ground, he heard one of the guards say, "It's time to tie the knot." Dantes wondered what this knot could be. He heard something heavy placed on the ground beside him. Now a cord was being fastened tightly around his feet. He was picked up by the head and the feet and swung to and fro. Now the guards shouted, "One, two, and three," and at the same moment Dantes felt himself being flung into space. He was falling rapidly downwards. Now he felt a tug on his feet, heavy weight upon them, which made him fall faster and faster. Suddenly he crashed into icy cold water. Now he was under the water and still going downwards. So he was not being buried in the ground. Dantes had been flung into the sea with a 36-pound cannonball tied in his feet. The sea was a burial ground of the Chiadif. Chapter 14, The Rescue. In this chapter, we would come to know how Dantes escaped from the sea and now rescued by few sailors. Dantes held his breath, so he was acting quickly. With his knife, he ripped open the sack and tried to get his feet free from the heavy balls which was pulling him down. He struggled, but he was still sinking. His lungs seemed to be bursting. Gathering all his strength, he bent double and cut the cord around his legs. The cannonball sank slowly to the bottom of the sea, pulling with it the snack, which had nearly become his shroud. Dantes shot upwards. As soon as he reached the surface, he gulped air into his lungs. Then he dived under the water again so that he could not be seen. He swam about 50 yards under the water and came up again. He looked up at Chiadif and could just see the guards looking down at the spot in the sea where they had thrown him. He dived under the water again and swam far away. When he came up the next time, he was so far away that nobody could have seen him. Now he swam on the surface. He swam on, and the terrible prison disappeared in the darkness. After swimming for several hours, he came to a small rocky island. No one appeared to live there, for it was quite barren. Dantes was tired out. He pulled himself out of the water, lay down in the shelter of a rock to go to sleep. Long afterwards, he was awakened by the noise of thunder. A storm was gathering. Soon he was being lashed by wind and rain. He crawled as far as possible under his sheltering rock, but it was not much protection. Suddenly, a very bright flash of lightning lit up his little island and the sea around. He caught a glimpse of a fishing boat being driven rapidly towards the island. A minute later, there was a cracking noise and the boat was smashed into pieces. There were cries from the sailors, and in another flash of lightning, he saw their heads bobbing out in frothy waters. Dantes left his shelter, ran to the water's edge, hoping to save some of the drowning men, but all he could see was the black swirling water. The fishing boat and the men on it had disappeared. Dante sadly returned to the shelter of his rock. When the sun came up in the next morning, he went again to the scene of the wreck. The sea was dotted with broken pieces of wood, and on a rock near by lay a red fisherman's cap. Dantes looked across the sea. In the distance, he could see now the outline of Chiadif. Very soon, they could find out that he had escaped, and the alarm would be sounded. Now the guards would be sent all over the fortress to look for him. Boats would go to the nearby islands to search for him and bring him back. It would not be long before he was found. He looked around him. There was no place to hide. He looked again out to sea towards the Chiadif. As he watched, he saw a sailing ship come out of the harbor of Marseilles. It sailed on past the Chiadif and towards the island on which Dante stood. He could see that it would soon pass by on its way to the open sea. He quickly seized the fisherman's cap and put it on his head. He jumped into the sea, taking with him a large piece of wooden wreckage from the fishing boat. The wood helped to support him in water. He needed its help, for was still tired from his hours of swimming and the restless night in the storm. He made his way slowly through the water to the place where he knew the sailing ship would pass. Now the ship was coming closer. When it was only about 100 yards away, Dante called out for help. The sailors heard him. They lowered a boat, rowed towards him. As they pulled him out of the water, Dante collapsed in their arms. When he recovered consciousness, at the end of this chapter, he found himself lying on the deck of the sailing ship, looking up into the faces of the sailors who had rescued him. Thank you.